Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of Coffee with Corey and Jeff. And we're excited to kick off kind of a new mini-series, if you will, on the demystifying digital marketing. And, you know, marketing is definitely a cloudy, mystical, you know, where do I spend my money? Where do leads actually come from? Sometimes it feels like they sort of fall from the sky, and how do I measure things? And lots of nuances around the digital world and digital marketing. So I think there's a lot of misconception out there about that. And so today we wanted to touch on specifically SEO. And if there is one area that requires probably a lot of straight talk.
Yes. Demystification.
It would be in the area of SEO, because SEO has evolved tremendously. So, Corey, first of all, let's just lay the groundwork here on what are some of the misunderstandings around SEO. What areas even need to be demystified? What are some of the areas that there's clearly confusion out in the industry? Can you just at least let's just talk through that first?
Yeah, I think the number one base challenge is identifying how to evaluate SEO and what it really is. So by definition, search engine optimization is the elevation or the process of elevating your presence on the web. Notice there's two things in that statement I didn't say. Number one is I didn't say your website, I said your presence. And number two is I didn't say your ranking, I said your presence on the web. So we oftentimes misunderstand the title or the definition of search engine optimization for search engine ranking position. Where does my website rank? When I Google my business, I don't see myself, therefore my SEO is failing. How many times have we had discussions till we're blue in the face to say that's not the way we evaluate?
Okay, so let's go a layer deeper there on that. That right there, I think is one of the root issues around the statement, my SEO isn't working. So can you just, I know it's nuanced, so can you just break down the difference between the SEO, your overall presence on the web, and your search engine ranking? Can you just dialogue about that a little bit deeper? Just make sure we break those two concepts apart.
Yeah, certainly. So you're optimizing your presence. You start by evaluating the different methods for what you're trying to optimize. So again, we're not optimizing your website. We're optimizing your business presence. YouTube is a search engine. It's not a website. You know, you do a video like we're doing now. We're optimizing our web presence by doing a video vlog series that has nothing directly to do with our website. Facebook, not a website, but it's a search engine. List goes on and on. So first is identifying where do we want to elevate our presence, and how does that directly correlate to the effort, which is ultimately about gaining eyeballs and gaining exposure.
Right. Okay. So the term SEO is almost without doubt, or almost without distinction, the you label that to your website. That's what people think of SEO. Almost every single time they think my SEO is my website. So what are the components of SEO then? So you're talking through, you know, YouTube and Facebook, and obviously there's reviews and referrals. Can you talk about then what makes up SEO?
Anything that is organically related to your business on the web, and placing it higher in a position, better position of authority, in a stronger position of authority. Example, business listings. There are multiple listings out on the internet, as we know, that impact whether or not you're found or not. From everything from Yahoo to, again, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. All of these elements have some level of business listing optimization. So, because again, the user that we're trying to go after isn't just in one microcosm. They're not just on Google.
Right.
And I think that, and the industry hasn't helped this. The industry that we're fighting against is saying, I can get you ranked number 1 on Google.
Right.
And so we've taught the industry, the healthcare industry, to think of SEO as being synonymous with where you rank with your website.
Yeah.
And it's our fault. We've done it.
Yeah.
To create
SEO
this
vendors,
problem.
SEO
Yeah.
solution providers have really beat that drum.
Yeah. And we're constantly undoing that with clients, saying, let's evaluate this properly. Let's define, if you want to rank higher in search, okay, that's fine. That's a metric of SEO. But it isn't what SEO is by definition.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is SEO is a broader definition, I think, than most of us are used to hearing.
Mm-hmm.
My search engine optimization is my footprint on the web, in the digital space, and it
Yes.
could be Facebook, it could be YouTube, it could be definitely Google, certainly can be reviews sites, health grades, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing you say all of those things work together to establish your SEO.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Another story example to use a comparison. When we run traditional marketing, radio ad, television, billboard, there's no way to understand how we rank with that type of promotion.
Sure.
We don't know if 10 people see our billboard or 1,000 people see our billboard. We're making estimations based on what the billboard company tells us.
Mm-hmm.
So you would call that traffic. How many times is our billboard in front of eyeballs?
Yep.
SEO is no different. There are eyeballs or viewers that are in these various components of the web. And the goal of SEO ultimately is to be in front of more eyeballs that are, of course, targeted to the types of services, treatments, etc. that you're offering.
Mm-hmm.
But that's all SEO is really in a nutshell.
Okay.
So we've got to eliminate the ranking position as SEO.
Yep.
It's a subset of it.
So super helpful, because if you don't have your nomenclature down, if you don't have the definitions down, you're immediately set up for misunderstanding.
Yeah. And
my SEO isn't working. My website's not at the top of Google, so my SEO. Okay, well we gotta define our terms, our terminology here first, right?
Yeah, and it's going to help with your provider. If you've got a webmaster or a social media expert or whomever it is that you're working with, get your communication aligned first, so you know what to ask, and then you know what to evaluate.
Well, and probably a good evaluation point, if they don't understand that concept, you might be in
barking up the wrong tree. Yeah.
You might want to find a new solution provider, new
Yes.
vendor, some more help.
Yes.
So that's super helpful. Then let's go back to, we were kind of bifurcating the difference between SEO and search engine ranking, right? Can you talk about then what is the ranking element of this? I mean, we talked about SEO being the overall footprint, but what's the difference between that and your search engine ranking? Because I have a hunch that's what most people are really
That's
thinking.
where they get hung up. Yeah.
That's what they're thinking about when
Totally.
they're thinking about their SEO.
Totally, they do. And so the ranking position, or what's called SERP, is directly correlated with where you rank in a search query.
Mm-hmm.
So I type in dentist near me or chiropractor near me. That is and what comes up, what search results come up in a query, again, not necessarily Google only, although they're the gorilla in the room, so we typically refer to Google when we talk about SERP.
Sure.
Where you rank or where you come up in that search would be called search engine ranking position. And it has become extremely difficult to use any traditional type or even non-traditional SEO tactics to elevate your ranking in Google, because Google ultimately has gotten so sophisticated that there is the challenge of, you can't fool Google anymore.
Right.
In fact, you don't want to fool Google because Google will blacklist you. So you have to be we call it white hat tactics, not black hat tactics, right? There are black hat ways that you can try to fool Google into putting you up to the top. You don't want to be there.
And we'll talk about some of those here in a minute. Just things to maybe avoid as we demystify SEO here.
So the SERP ranking is a factor to look at. We can't eliminate it from the conversation.
Sure.
But we can't let it be our de facto answer to whether or not we're performing well in SEO.
Yep.
Because that would be basically like putting one small metric in a box and saying that's the only thing that matters.
Right.
What really matters is traffic. Mm-hmm. Ideally to a contact point, which that's where the website becomes an important component, because we want to direct traffic to the website.
Yeah.
In most cases, but nothing wrong with directing traffic to a YouTube video.
Yeah,
we're getting hopefully exposure from the video to the right target audience who's interested in our content.
Right, and you can see the pitfall. You can see the how people get sucked into obsessing about their SERP.
Yep.
Right, obsessing about that search engine ranking position, because who hasn't Googled their website, their business?
We obsess over it.
You obsess over it, right? So, and it's a natural place to look because we all, for the most part, use Google to search for things. And although it's not the only place, obviously, but it's easy to fall into that trap.
Yep.
To fall into the trap, and then labeling that SERP performance as my SEO isn't working. We get calls all the time, panicked calls all the time, saying my SEO's not working.
Yeah. Or it went down since you took over. That's another one that I just love to hear, which is totally irrelevant because that's not how you measure search results.
Right.
And so, and also, how do you even prove that it went down? Mm-hmm. So we should probably talk about that because let's be honest, the audience wants to know about the demystification of SERP. I mean, that's really what they're challenged with. They generally probably understand that these other things are valuable in terms of exposure.
Sure.
But let's talk SERP specifically because that's what we have to demystify.
Yes.
So the first thing we have to understand is how Google identifies ranking. How do they decide what ranks better than something else? Mm-hmm. And this is where it has evolved drastically from even 6 months ago, and will probably this video may be dated in another 6 months. Right. This may or may not be
certainly the stuff that's been drug along for the last decade is just
ridiculous.
Laughable at this point. And yet people cling on to these old methods of and the old styles of thinking.
So Google looks at, first of all, they look at the organic search results, and defining organic just means anything that's not in a Google ecosystem like the Google Maps, or there are many other ecosystems. Ads, paid ads. Those are the two primary. There are other ecosystems, but we'll stay on those because those are most relevant to healthcare.
Yeah. So
anything organic would be underneath maps or underneath ads when you search for a topic or a treatment, or et cetera. So those rankings are separate. The algorithms that Google uses are separate from the algorithms that they use in maps and even in ads. People oftentimes don't understand that ads even need optimization.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Google won't serve an ad up effectively, and they'll charge you more if they're not optimized.
It's got to be relevant.
Yeah, so optimization is huge. Mm-hmm. So if we look at the ecosystem that is Google, and then we identify how people search, Google's gotten very sophisticated at elevating ads and maps above search results.
Sure.
Because, why? They're a multi-billion-dollar advertising company. They know ultimately that anybody who's searching for something, if they can create opportunities for advertising and to stay in the Google ecosystem, they grow their business.
Sure. We've all over time more and more adopted and accepted that user interface that Google has increasingly encroached upon their revenue streams type results versus organic results. If you really look at the organic results section, it's pretty crowded in there these days. I mean, the amount of ad placements, it seems to grow every year, right?
Depending on the
ad, organic.
And depending on the competitiveness of a keyword, It's Google will serve up to 4 ads at the top, and I believe it's 4 ads at the bottom.
Right.
And then you add Google Maps in the middle, because everything that we search for in the healthcare industry is considered a local brick and mortar search. They know that if you type in chiropractor or dentist or MD, you're looking for a chiropractor, dentist,
It's
MD.
a near me kind of search, right?
Yes.
What is near me? What is the physical locations, brick and mortar locations?
So the maps are going to show up prominently almost every single time.
Right.
You add the complexity of the fact that 80% on average of these searches not only are considered local searches, meaning maps are going to show up, but they're done on a mobile device.
Yeah.
So now you're talking, when you get to that organic, you're going to scroll on your mobile device likely 3 times before you see any organic results.
Yeah.
So that's why the elevation of click-throughs on maps and ads have skyrocketed.
Sure.
Because we're in our map, or in our Google Maps
Yep.
first when we search our phone.
Yeah.
Almost every
All
time.
comes up. Yeah, and we're going to touch on that in another episode. We're going to dive into SEM, search engine marketing. So we'll stay tuned for that.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the ability to actually influence SERP.
Yep.
Let's do, for this episode, we're
Stay
talking
on
about
that.
demystifying SEO. And when we're talking SEO, people are really thinking SERP.
Yep.
So just let's quickly break down, can SERP, your organic results, can they be influenced?
Mm-hmm.
How are they influenced by your efforts and by Google's algorithms? Let's just talk through, can SERP be manipulated these days? Can I control my SEO, my SERP,
Yes.
these days? Let's talk through that, because I think that is, if we really distill all this conversation down, that is the question.
Yeah, and where is your money best spent?
Yeah, right.
If we're going to suggest to our viewership what to do, we certainly want to tell them where to spend their money wisely.
That's right.
And so the answer is, can you impact or influence SERP? Yes. The answer is yes. The question is it a good idea, and how?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So again, if you look at what we call long tail keywords, like, why do I have back pain?
Mm-hmm.
Or sciatica pain in my lower right quadrant, or whatever a long tail keyword would be.
Yep.
Those search queries, you could write content, you could build videos, you could write blog posts, you could build a bunch of content, you could optimize your website pages, you could do a bunch of work.
Yep.
And perhaps influence in a white hat way where your content ranks in search for that particular keyword phrase.
Okay, so that can be helpful.
Could be helpful.
Certainly need relevant content.
Yeah.
Certainly need Google's going to serve up what's
Yeah.
relevant. So long tail keywords still work.
Yes. The question is, Google is a massive, massive functioning, living, eating, breathing thing.
Yep.
Technologically speaking.
Yep.
How
Changing
long?
daily.
Yes. How long and how much emphasis and effort and money and time do you have to put into that in order to finally get Google to recognize your content and elevate the presence? And that question is dependent on many, many variables. And then you have to ask yourself, is that even where the ducks are flying? Is that where I want to be?
Yeah, are those searches even relevant?
Yeah.
Are people even looking?
They're what I would be considering top of funnel type searchers, meaning they're not ready to necessarily make a buying decision. They're in research mode.
Sure.
So the length to success there, the path to success there could be 6 months, a year, and thousands of dollars to write content and build content.
What, there's no silver bullet?
No.
This guy that called me told me he could fix our SEO.
Yeah, you should run the other way.
weeks.
You should run the other way really fast when he says, I can get you to rank number 1. It's like, for what?
Right.
Yeah,
For
ask
what?
that question.
So complicated, right?
For what?
So, I noticed the other day, I was searching for a particular service, and the search definitely changed. I was in one part of town,
Yeah.
And changed literally as I crossed over into, we've got another city that's next to us. It's about 15 minutes away, 10 minutes away. Same identical search. And I got different results. And I'm like, wait, where did that business go? Why does that happen? I mean, if I can control my SERP, something's going on behind the scenes there, right? I'm having the same search. And I wasn't putting in like a location or anything. I mean, I was Googling the same thing.
You weren't putting in a location, but Google knew where you were.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
So that's the difference.
Yep.
It's Google clearly states that they consider proximity and relevancy in a mobile search, and because
of which you cannot control, right?
Nope.
Yeah.
So this is why SERP is so frustrating for both our client to understand and for us to get our client to stop worrying about it.
Yeah.
Because we've moved past that as a product in Google. Google is now no different than an advertising play.
Yeah.
And they built a very, very good business to accommodate that.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll get into this more when we get into our other series, but when it comes to maps, that is even more relevant, and reviews can't control your SERP in maps either.
Right.
They, again, don't misunderstand the word optimization versus control.
Good point.
Right?
Yep.
We can optimize, but we cannot control.
Yep.
Only Google, and I always use this example, only Google and God really know what's going on with Google. And I'm not even sure that, I won't certainly devalue God, but I'm not even sure that God fully understands
some complicated
stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. So we have to understand that. And Google also, they publicize 300 different search criteria that they use for their algorithm, but there's lots that they don't publicize.
Sure.
And they're changing all the time, which again, our point of like this video might be totally irrelevant in 6 months.
Could be, yeah.
You know?
They've got new algorithms coming out all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, very interesting. Very interesting. So first, the definition of SEO, demystifying that. SEO is not where you come up on a Google search. SEO is your digital footprint out on the World Wide Web and how people generally find you. And that does need to be optimized. And there's lots of tools you can do to be found, get placed, make sure data is accurate, citation management, reviews. That is a big ecosystem that we certainly try to help people understand. And we've got a lot of tools to actually help with SEO. But the confusion comes in that they then immediately go over 2 weeks later and Google themselves.
That
which
becomes
is
their
pointless.
benchmark
That
for
becomes their
success, and it's got to be broader than that.
Right. So they're evaluating their overall SEO, their overall digital strategy to be found by one piece of real estate of which they can't control anyway. It's very challenging to control. Location's a factor, all kinds of things that frankly none of us understand or are privy to. And it's essentially worthless to go Google yourself, correct?
Yes.
Or close to it.
Yes.
Not worthless, but it's
worthless to Google yourself and expect that to be the one metric you judge your SEO by.
Yes.
So another way to, if you're going to obsess over anything, obsess over traffic and impressions and watch that number. And then the next one would be, which we'll talk about when we talk about advertising, and is conversion.
Yeah. So
I would much rather have 20,000 visitors to my website than be ranked number one on Google, in quotes, and have no visitors.
Different data point. Yes. So instead of like putting the blinders on and staring at Google and being like, I'm not getting found, turn and look at your website stats, which you should have and have available to you. If you don't, there's lots of tools out there for that. Yeah. You should be able to look at traffic. And if your traffic is up, your SEO strategy is winning.
Definitely.
Your SERP might not be where you think it should be, or may not be in your control, but your website traffic is really the ultimate measuring stick.
And the only thing I would be careful so we don't eat our words on what we said earlier is it isn't just website traffic that's elevating. It might be
Good
Facebook
point.
traffic. It might be YouTube visits. It might be, name your channel.
Yeah, good point. Absolutely. It's your whole presence. It's the whole footprint.
Yep.
So, yeah. Well, probably could go on for another hour on this. Very, very misunderstood topic. Very complicated. Ever-changing. Literally minute by minute as you're driving around in your car.
We'll probably be
rules are
updating this
changing.
video in 3
Probably.
to 6 months.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the point, I think, is to demystifying SEO that we just, that really needs to be heard is it is challenging. It is a bigger conversation than you think. It's so much more than where you find yourself when you Google yourself. And don't obsess over that. Don't get sold the snake oil for anybody who says they can control that easily. Not that there's not tactics, but certainly a lot of snake oil out there, a lot of really expensive services that frankly are selling a lot of hot air. And preying on people, frankly,
for their lack of real understanding of how it works.
Yep.
And a lot of the healthcare industry, they're very competitive, which is good.
Yep.
But it's bad because people prey on that.
Yeah.
And they say, well, we can get you this, we can get you this result. And I would be real careful about what that specific result is that they're saying they can get. Because I can promise you to get you ranked number 1 on search for your brand name or for things that you should be number 1 on anyway.
Right.
So the question is, ask the deeper question, which is, well, what can you get me number 1 on?
Evaluate your industry. If you're a healthcare practice, if you're a dental practice, whatever you're at, it's like you need to know what you're trying to be found for.
Yes.
So, great. Well, very, very helpful. Thank you for breaking a lot of that down for us. Really good stuff. And we're going to be touching on what you can control in another episode, which is search engine marketing. And there's a whole strategy around that. And that is a place where you can win.
Yes,
and you can control
you do have
So
control.
You do have control. So we'll be touching on that. Hope you guys tune in for that. Thanks for spending time with us today. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.